Gεια σας. Welcome to Greek Like Me, the podcast about all things Greek. I'm your host, Pamela Deodes Wood. Email us at stealthgreek@gmail.com to share comments, questions, and stories about anything and everything Greek. Christos Anesti. Today we're talking to Alex Kadis, whose first novel, Big Nobody, is already in bookstores. It's a coming-of-age story encompassing loss, trauma, abuse, resilience, love, and the embarrassment of being part of a Greek-Cypriot immigrant community in 1970s London. Teenager Connie Kostas is mourning the deaths of her mother and brothers and planning her escape from the man she holds responsible, the big fat murderer, aka her dark, controlling father. In between school, music lessons, and mandatory Greek gatherings, she plots to kill him, with Mark Bolan and David Bowie advising her. Big Nobody is a survival story that's brutally funny, disturbing, and insightful, and ultimately satisfying. Alex has had careers in music journalism, artist management, and works now as a consultant in the music industry.
Hello.
Hello, Alex Kadis. Welcome to
Hello.
Greek Like Me.
Hi.
It's wonderful to meet you. I've enjoyed your book very much.
Thank you so much, Pamela. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm actually on the second read through because I was trying to figure out what I could talk about that wasn't going to be a spoiler, because I kind
Okay.
of hate a spoiler as a reader.
Mm.
Um, and you've got so many layers to the book that part of the joy of it was going through it and revelation after revelation, um, like peeling the
Thank
onion, as they
you.
say.
Really warms my heart that you got that. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. It was, and as a Greek of the diaspora,
Yeah.
I mean, I think anybody's going to enjoy this. I like reading like Indian of the diaspora and Chinese of the diaspora. I enjoy all that, getting that private peek in there, but to have a book written that reflects my experience as well, which is rare, as you know. We don't get a lot of that, especially with the humor. You know, they tend to be more serious books. They don't get
Yeah.
into the
Yeah.
humor. I was
Yeah.
grateful for that. I really was.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you. You're my ideal reader. That's brilliant.
Yes, I'm telling all my friends, okay, just check it out. It is
Oh,
because
thank you.
it's heartbreaking, but it's so hilarious. And you capture that sort of dynamic of the love-hate of the culture, because
Mm.
we're living in this country. This is where we're living, but we're still pulled back into the old world for good
Yeah.
and for bad. Can you tell me a little bit about your background?
Yeah, of course I can. Um, so I'm half Greek Cypriot and half whatever the other side is a complete mess. It's Romany Gypsy, it's Dutch, it's French, but basically it kind of distilled down to being English. So
Mhm.
so my mum is English, my dad's Greek Cypriot. He was first generation immigrant. He was a tailor. And
Mhm.
like the fat murderer in the book is a tailor. Although I have to say, the fat murderer in the book is not my dad. Um,
That's good to hear.
Thank goodness, yeah. Um, so I was born in 1962. I studied English literature when I went to university. I've always loved reading, loved words, loved prose, loved poetry, love what words can do for you in terms of your emotions and in terms of your learning curve as well,
Mhm.
you know. And I went to work in the music industry as a writer first of all, and then got involved in music management and consultancy. And it wasn't until probably coming towards the end of the lockdown, really. I think our last lockdown here in London, and my work had run really dry in the music industry because nobody was touring. And my work relies on people needing me to help them through tours and things like that. So I just sat down one day and thought, I'm going to write the book I promised myself I would write for a long time. And I didn't
Wow.
really know what was going to come out. And I wrote the first sentence and then it sort of spilled out from there. And I didn't realize it was going to be so Greek, you know. And and I think because I had suppressed a lot of my Greekness, particularly when my parents got divorced, we left the Greek side of us behind and we kind of went full on English. And I think
Hmm.
I somehow got distance from a really important part of what I am. And I really somehow coughed it all back up when I was writing the novel and sort of reconnected. So, and it felt, yeah, I came out of it feeling Greek, which was really nice.
That's so cool. It once they get their claws and that's the end, you're still, even if you walk away, you're still part of the culture. It's in you. It's
That's right.
part
Well, what's that phrase like? Every time I walk away, they pull me back in.
absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. And
yeah.
that was another level I related on because my dad, his mom was Swedish and his father
Oh,
was of Scottish and English descent.
right.
So
Okay.
he
So
was
you have
he was
got
white
everything.
daddy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so that's it's kind of wild. So I was relating to it on so many different levels, and I'm the same age you are. I'm actually 2 years
Right.
older than you are. So
Right.
the
Yeah.
music, the books that were important at the time. I was also an English literature major, so I was it was just hitting for me on so many different levels. And but I
Right.
think this would appeal to anyone because you're so down to earth and so funny. And it's the John Donne pops in, and that's great. And different musical David Bowie. You were
Mm.
so abusive to David Bowie. Poor David Bowie.
I live with I still manage one artist from my management days, and he rents some space from me in my house. And he's a very, very good mimic. And he's also very, very well informed about music. So every time I needed a David Bowie line, I would call him and I was like, George, come here for a minute. How would David Bowie say this? And he'd get into his sort of David Bowie impersonation mode. And then he'd say, I think he would say it like this. So then I'd go, right, hold on. And I'd type it. So it wasn't
That's
only I wasn't the only person that was being cruel to David Bowie.
that is so funny because Connie Costas living these two separate worlds, it's like
Yeah,
her confidants are David Bowie and Mark Bolan. She's got the
yeah,
posters on the wall.
yeah,
And that teenage world of sort of relying on the music that you love and
yeah,
your musician heroes was also really appealing. And it was just so funny that they would answer her back. And they would
yeah.
answer her back in the persona of these actual musicians, which was just great. So you bring us almost immediately into her semi-fantasy world. She knows it's not real.
She does. On some level, she knows, but I think when she's, because the story is told from an adult perspective, isn't it, looking back, but you don't realize that without creating any spoilers until later on in the novel. But
Mhm.
I really wanted to capture the voice and the innocence of somebody who was going through a bad time and who was very young and not quite old enough to really process what was going on in her life. And the sort of the point of Bowie and Mark Bolan, they live somewhere between her reality and her dream world, and she's created a safe world for herself. It's her safe place. And they're obviously, different sides of her psyche. And I wanted the Mark Bolan side to be representative of the child that she still wants to be, the innocence that she still wants to hang on to. And for David Bowie to be the voice of the adult that she was going to become, which is why David Bowie is a bit harsh, and which is why she is harsh towards David Bowie, because she doesn't want to grow up. You
Yeah,
know,
she's
she doesn't-
smacking back at him.
yeah, exactly.
It was it was so hilarious though. It was
Poor
so much
Dave.
fun. And this is where the many layers start to come in because we see her like calling her father the fat murderer immediately, which is, you're thinking teenage hate. And then it's pretty early on that we find out why she calls him the
Yeah,
fat murderer,
yeah,
that her mother and two younger brothers had been killed in a car accident that he caused,
yes,
and that she will blame him for it. But at
yes,
the same time, he likes to throw the blame on her
yes,
because she pissed him off
yeah,
as
yeah.
he took off in the car.
And she lives with that. She lives with that guilt because she kind of almost agrees with him. It's
Mm.
not until he throws the accusation at her that she thinks, hang on a minute, no. I'm the child here. You were the adult. I wasn't driving the car. But
Right.
she does feel a certain, she doesn't admit it to herself for a very long time, but she feels a culpability. She's been a pain in the bum, you know, and she was a pain in the bum that night, and she's been a pain in the bum ever since.
Because she just wanted to be herself
Yeah.
and push back against her dad and the culture as well.
Yes. Yeah.
So I could see that she struggles with that teenage guilt, not just of the accident, but the father, the big fat murderer, was very
Yeah.
abusive to
Yes.
the whole family.
Yeah.
And she takes on that guilt too, that she should have been able to protect them somehow. She behaved
Yeah.
differently. Things might have been different for all of them, which of course it couldn't have been because it was him.
Yeah. She's
But
full of what if,
yeah,
which we all are in life. But I think particularly when you're a child, when you get to our age, you start the what ifs tend to go away because you've got a much larger and broader view of your life because there's so much more of it behind you. And you kind of, that things happen and quite often the what ifs are not applicable. But I think when you're younger, you think, oh, I wish I could have controlled that. Couldn't I have made that better? And I think that's what she is sort of concerned about. But she also decides that she's not going to be a victim, which is where I think a lot of the humor comes in as well. Because it
yeah,
could be a very dark novel, but it's not really a dark novel at all. I wanted to bring a lot of humor into it. I wanted her to be somebody who was extraordinary but not perfect, and
mhm,
somebody who absolutely refused to be labeled a victim by the actions of other people. You know, so that's where a lot of the humor comes into it. And she hates Mrs. Petrides, for example,
oh my
um,
God. I
because
hate
she
her too.
yeah, me too. I mean, because she thinks Mrs. Petrides is bonking her dad, which he is, that's pretty
Oh,
clear. And so anybody that's got any affection for her father is definitely on the naughty list as far as she's concerned. But,
oh my God.
she's so I wanted to have a Mrs. Petrides so that you could hear the venom and the scathing descriptions that she has of this woman, you know, uh, because she's a teenager and she's quite capable of being horrible and unreasonable.
Teenagers are brutal.
Oh, listen, I've got a lot of good kids. They are really brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And and here, this is not even a year as we start out. It's not even a year since her mother has died at the
yes,
hands of the fat murderer.
yeah,
And he's fooling around with Mrs. Petrides. And her wonder is like, when did this start? How long has this been going on?
yeah,
So it's in so many ways, he
yeah.
betrayed her on many levels.
He did, yeah. And there's a line in the book, I think quite at the beginning, that I was doing a really nice book event last night, and somebody had pulled out this quote to say that they really liked it. And it was that he had, she was this amazing free woman who was a, a flamenco dancer in her spare time, and
Mhm.
he had, he basically pressed out all the beautiful creases in her until she was as flat as the women that he had never really been attracted to. So, he was one of those people that crushed everybody, you know.
Yeah,
We've all known somebody like that.
sure.
And in our kinder moments, we think, well, they've probably had crushing moments in their own lives. But when we're not feeling kind, we think, God, you know, why is this person in my life? And I think that's what she feels. And she has no room for pity for him at all. A couple of times she sees a different view of him where he looks pensive and she thinks, no, I'm not going to take that on. And there's a point where Auntie Rula says to her, look, your dad's been through a bad time as well. And she just explodes and she says, I'm not going to feel pity for this man. She cannot let the feeling in.
Yeah, which is understandable because she went through that, losing her mom, losing her brothers, and she's
Yeah.
not evil, and he
No,
is. So people do go through things, and not
yes,
everybody becomes abusive, but he was abusive to begin with.
he was. Yes, he was an abusive person. And that was kind of you talked about the diaspora. at the
Mhm.
beginning. And there was, I remember as a kid, we were all hit. There was nothing wrong with smacking your kid round the head, or if you were very little, you get your
Mhm.
pants pulled down in public and a smack on the bottom. It
Mhm.
was quite ordinary in those times. And and particularly in countries where there was a very orthodox upbringing, and it was that first generation of immigrants, and then they had children. And I think there was a lot of tension
Yeah.
between children and the parents because the parents were still looking at the old ways, and trying to hold on to values that they'd had for their whole lives. But the children were part of their lives were in this orthodox upbringing and within the community. But the other half of their lives were in school, and they were with, European people, English people, or in your case, white Americans. So
Mhm.
it was very, very difficult. I think it was certainly, I mean, my life wasn't, remotely as hard as Constance's, and, I'm not as remotely resourceful as Constance either, but
Mhm.
I did feel that struggle as a kid. It got to the point where I was about 11 or 12, and the girls started being interested in boys and they wanted to go to youth clubs, and I was not allowed to join them, and it
Mhm.
started to make me feel very separate as
Yeah.
well, and that was, I think that was difficult. And where I live in London, it's very multicultural, and I have quite a lot of Indian friends and Pakistani friends, and they all say the same thing, you
Yeah.
know, and also that idea as well of being excruciatingly embarrassed by your community because they are louder, they are more colourful, they are more prevalent, they are more visible, than the nice, sedate English people.
Yeah.
I have a friend, Sangeeta, who is Indian, and she said when she was a teenager, and all the Indians would come over to their house, she would think, please let none of the neighbors be watching them arrive, because they'd arrive with, bedding and with food and loads of kids, and there'd be hundreds of them piling out of the car. And she'd think, please, please, let nobody see. So I think it's a fairly common thing. Yeah. And I wanted to address that in the book.
Absolutely. And it really comes through. I was just thinking about growing up with, because we lived in a certain area. I'm in New Jersey, so
Yeah.
we have in the area we're in, we do also have a lot of Italian
Yeah.
and Black Americans and Latinos and whatever, and that was like a relief. But the neighborhood that we lived in was mostly like it was working class white people,
Yeah.
and the cars would pull up, and these, I love the way you talk about the man hands of the ants, because it immediately pictured my aunts coming out with these pots bigger than they couldn't see over the top of them and screaming to my mother, who was on the second floor in the house, and the houses were so close together, and we were like, oh my,
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
walking away from the house, and my mother, Pamela, like
Yes.
going all the way
Oh,
down the street. Nobody
oh,
else's
yeah.
mother did that.
No, no. And I remember when we moved into a bit of a whiter area actually when I was about 14. And everybody, I mean, I was the most exotic person in the school. And I made a new friend, and I went to her house, and her father was a dentist and her mother was a teacher, and they were very quiet and they were very well spoken. And when you ate dinner, you sat round the table, and you were very quiet, and you said, "Can you please pass me the salt?" Then when she came to my house, we were all screaming at each other, fighting over the roast lamb. And getting the bread and mopping up the gravy with the bread and stuffing it in, more food than anybody needed. And I used to be so embarrassed about it. And the whiskey would be on the table, and at 14 or 15, if we wanted a drop of whiskey, we could have a drop of whiskey. And
Yeah.
I remember my friend sitting there, and afterwards she said to me, she went, "It's fantastic," you know, but we were so different. I remember that day my mum was up a ladder doing some painting, and she had on one shoe and one slipper, and it was like my family is utter chaos.
Your mother got sucked into the whole Greek.
She did. She was a good Greek cook, my mum, actually.
Uh,
Yeah.
that's that's great. So is my husband, who's Cuban. So
Oh,
he's a
really?
very
Yeah,
good Greek cook. But I know exactly what you mean. It's like you sort
yeah,
of love it. And my sister and I would like giggle about stuff,
yeah.
at night, especially if everybody was stuffed into the house and we were shoved on the floor in sleeping bags. We would be like, "Theophanasi, Theopipiga, it was, but at the same time, it's like when we were out in the bigger world, it was like, oh my God, you just felt like you wanted to melt into the sidewalk sometimes.
You really did. And you felt, I mean, even just with school lunch, I never had a proper lunch box. It was always some kind of bagged up thing with a half a tub of, hummus or something, and then a big lump of like seeded bread and a bit of leftover meat. I'd open my school lunch and think, oh God, and there'd be maybe a little bit of Greek pastry in there or something, and the other girls, they would have these beautifully presented lunch boxes with little ham sandwiches cut into quarters, and I'd look at theirs and look at mine and think, my life is chaos. My life is big and it's chaos, you
Yeah.
know. Yeah. And now, of course, I welcome the chaos. I
Yeah.
don't care about the order, but when you're 14, 15, you want to be the same as everyone else, don't you?
Yeah. Even kids who don't come from ethnic backgrounds, if they get a pimple or they
Oh,
start to grow in their hair sooner, their hairy legs sooner, they're mortified because it makes them a little bit different from everyone else. And coming from that type of background, which is horrifying and comforting all at the same time.
absolutely. It is. And I really wanted that to come across in the book as well. I wanted there to be the embarrassment and almost wanting to shun the community, but at the same time being so drawn to it and feeling
Mhm.
so safe within it as well. Which is why when Constance feels that she's been let down by her absolutely favorite Auntie Rulla,
Yeah,
that's the biggest heartbreak for her, really.
that is excruciating because you bring us into freak night. Greek night is freak night,
Yep.
and all of the craziness that's going on and her like, oh, everybody get away from me. But then the aunts descend on her, and as much as she's like, no, 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 they're
Yeah.
loving her up and they're giving her, they know what her favorite food is, they know what her favorite drink is.
Yeah.
And there's so much comfort there. And then
Yeah.
to realize that that comfort, which she can't get from her mom anymore, is she's not getting the backup that she needs when she needs it. And
Yeah, because, and again, we talk about the diaspora of all different cultures. In quite a lot of those cultures, it's male dominated and still is to an extent. But
yeah,
certainly 50 years ago in the Greek Cypriot culture, it was a patriarchy. And no matter how much the women managed their men, in the end, it was a man's world. And if a man put his foot down, that was it. The word, that was the final word, you know.
yeah,
So, and again, I sort of wanted to address that. I think in a way, the whole book is about being a woman,
mhm,
and learning to be a woman in any which way you can, and about the things that happen to you as a young woman and how they shape your life as an older woman. And what I wanted, I read a lot of books and I love a lot of books. Quite often, if there's a relationship involved, which there is in Big Nobody, um, it's always this sort of striving towards conventionality. You know,
mhm,
a boy meets girl, and whatever troubles they have, eventually a boy does meet a girl, and hopefully they'll live happily ever after in a conventional sense. And because Constance's life was so unconventional on the way up to being an adult, I really wanted her to embrace an unconventional existence eventually. Again, without
mhm,
giving away a spoiler. And that was a real thing for me, I think for women and for men as well, to be able to say, look, don't, because so many people feel bad that they're not conventional and that they don't live a conventional life. And what I really wanted to get across in the book is all sorts of things will happen to you in life that you can't control, but
mhm,
you can control how you end up. And if it means you end up embracing a more unconventional existence, don't think that's any less. You've not
mhm.
settled for less. You've just settled for something different. And it can be as rich and as giving and as loving as you want it to be. And that was really what I wanted to achieve in the book.
And you did, because I think we follow her journey. We follow Constance's journey from this funny, chaotic, and as we're getting into the darker side of what
Yeah,
happened, and we
yeah,
continue to get into darker and darker things,
yeah,
the humor keeps coming up, but we're rooting for her the entire time. Because I think on one level, all women can relate to that, being expected to fulfill certain
mm,
obligations. It's just worse in the Greek community,
mm,
um, especially at that time. But she stays true to herself, even though at times she feels like she's giving in.
yeah.
Ultimately, she still stays true to herself, and who can't respect that?
Yeah, and I think respect is the word. She refused to lose her self-respect, although she feels guilty about certain things, and although she feels ashamed about certain things, she has decided that whatever has happened to her wasn't her fault. You know,
Mhm.
there are some things that she feels she's culpable of, but then she does come to she makes her peace with those actually, but she refuses to be beaten down by life, and she's a bit fat, and she refuses to be insulted by that.
I
If
love that.
if somebody says you really shouldn't be wearing those clothes, she's like, "We're off,"
Yeah, really.
I look great, don't I? I think I look all right, And and again, that's the part of, you don't need to be a conventionally accepted size, or have a conventionally accepted lifestyle. You just have to find some strength within yourself, and I mean, it is, I mention a bit in the book, and I think I say in the book, it's really corny, but it's about self-love, you know
Mhm.
and it is a really important thing. And I think, in this sort of in our new age world of everyone talking about self-love, it becomes a bit, but actually, when you talk about it in a less woke, less ethereal way,
Mhm.
I hope what came across in the book is that you accept yourself. If you're intrinsically good, accept yourself and like what you see.
That was what was interesting about her. She kept fighting to be herself, even though she was different. When she went to school, she was the different girl. When she
Yeah,
was out in public, she was the different girl. And even within the Greek community, she was in a different world. She didn't fit in
yeah.
anywhere.
No,
And on certain levels, she was really okay with that. On some levels, she was yearning for it naturally as a teenager. But on
yeah,
other levels, she was just like, well, I'm not going for that
yeah,
male chauvinistic bullshit on the Greek side. I
yeah,
won't tolerate that.
yeah. And I think, very luckily she had Vass. We haven't mentioned Vass yet, but
No.
yeah, I think I got my book deal because my editor fell in love with Vass. I think that was it really. The first time we had a Zoom, she said to me, "Oh, I love Vass. I love him." And I said, "Okay, what about the rest of the book?" She went, "Yeah, but Vass is so lovely." But I think, fortunately for Constance, she has a really good, really close friend that she's grown up with called Vass, who she's slowly falling in love with. He's in a similar situation to her.
Mhm.
And I think, speaking with him and being with him, they have a very taciturn relationship. And I think that helps her. She feels backed up. She feels backed up by him, even though she tells him off and she accuses him of being weak-minded, and because she's on a roll constantly.
Mhm.
Um, but she has him, and she has music, and it's the music that really pulls her through.
It is. Voss is like the other oddball who sort of
Yes.
makes her feel like she's not the only one.
Yeah.
But her passion and her escape is the music,
Yeah.
learning to play the guitar, uh, which her father seems to just be oblivious to all of this
Yeah.
until he
Yeah.
sort of freaks out. And we're not going to get into that because that's kind of a
Yeah.
spoiler, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he just comes in the house, watches TV, yells at her,
Yeah. They
tries
live
to,
separate lives.
yeah.
You know, that's it. They are literally ships that pass in the night. And she says, sometimes as a bit of a sort of contractual obligation, she'll go into the same room as him and exchange a couple of words. He's seen her, she's seen him, and she's back up in her bedroom again, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, and the thing that she won't accept is that he he is also bereaved. No matter how much of an asshole he is,
Yeah.
um, he's lost two children and a
Yeah.
wife, you know, um, and he may be diddling Mrs. Patridis on the side, but you know, it's just a diddle, yeah, you
Yeah.
know, and
But
and so, but she refuses to acknowledge his bereavement. It's all 'cause she's a teenager, you know.
yeah.
She dislikes him and she can't think beyond herself. So in a few ways I did try to bring in a bit of sympathy for the fat murderer, but
Yeah.
but mostly I hope everybody really dislikes him.
I really dislike him. Well, the fact that he couldn't give her a smidgen of comfort
Yeah,
for losing her mother and brothers, he was aggrieved, but he just
yeah,
left her. He expected her to do some cooking and do certain things. And other than that, he just didn't seem to really
no,
care at all. But one of my favorite parts that leads to is the constant murder plots. She wants to kill him before her 16th birthday in revenge. And
yeah,
the different things throughout the book, it's like these little different plots. Okay, now it's going to be, was it laburnum seeds? The
yeah.
seeds that she
Rebellion
was,
seems to begin
that
with.
because her friend told her, yeah, that'll kill anybody. And she's putting it in his food. Well, that didn't work. And
Yeah,
then there's the heater above the bath, the electric heater above the bath, that she's
right.
loosening the screws
Yeah.
on.
Electrocution, yeah,
Yes.
by water. What else was there? Tacks in the tires of his car.
The tacks and tires of his car. There was something else too. I made a list because it just cracked me up so much.
Ah,
Oh, the
Project Pork
pork
Chop.
chop. The pork
Project
chop.
Pork Chop.
Freezing and unfreezing that pork chop so that it would
Yeah, yeah,
get some
so
sort
that
of
it gets
horrible bacteria and kill
good
it.
and sticky with salmonella and everything else that you can get in a pork chop. Every time, and I think it's David Bowie that says to her, one might think, Constance, that perhaps your heart isn't in this murdering business. And I think she says, "Oh, shut up, David Bowie. Nobody asked you to say
Yeah.
anything."
But it's so funny. I mean, here's this child plotting her father's death and actually putting into effect all these little plots. But it was hilarious because he was just such a jerk and just kept popping up. And every time she saw him pop, she was like, "Oh, maybe he'll die on the way home." Just,
Yeah. And she's like, he will not, he just won't die. It's like, and she's looking at him the following morning and she's like, it doesn't look as if he's going to be dying.
I have
Perhaps
to
you
do
should
more
get out of
research.
school. Yeah.
But that was so much fun. I enjoyed that so much. He was
Oh,
just so
sure you do.
impossible. But I mean, in addition to being responsible for the deaths and the beatings of the family before
Yeah.
um, their death,
Mm,
the verbal abuse, the cruelty. I mean, he wouldn't let the mother have anything.
no.
He nothing bright and sunny in her life. Everything was just crushed.
Yeah.
And then after she died, and I think this would make me want to kill my father.
Mm,
After she died, he got rid of everything that belonged to the mother and just tried to sort of erase her existence.
yeah. Yeah. And
That's
she
horrific.
feels she notices that and she says together they're erasing her because she starts to have a temporary memory loss as well
Mm,
through PTSD.
yeah.
And and there are things I think there are things I hoped to convey that there are things she probably did remember but chose not to. But there
Mm,
were also things that she just couldn't remember anymore. And she felt that person slipping away from her. My own mother died just before this Christmas. And I was
oh,
always
memory
worried that,
eternal.
yeah, and I was always worried that I would forget what she sounded like or looked like. But I've got so many videos, I'll never forget, you
Mm,
know.
yeah.
Constance didn't have that in the 1970s. She's got a couple of old photos, you
Yeah.
know, and that's it. So she's got nothing to remind her. And it is, when somebody dies, people do stop using their name as well. They might refer to say, you know, I hear you lost your mother, right? But they will never say the name. And
Mhm.
so, and I think she felt that her mum was being erased and she was partly responsible. But the father literally forensically cleared the house of
Yeah.
anything to do with the mother because obviously the implication is he's clearing out his guilt.
Yeah. Yeah. And
He's
she
clearing
was
out his
just
conscience. Yeah.
Yeah. And she was just trying to cope. And so, sort of boxing herself in away from the pain. And
Yeah.
here he was taking everything away from her that she could have. Some of my most precious items, my mother and I didn't get along. She was such a Greek and I was such an American.
Yeah.
But some of my most precious things are things that belong to her that I have memories attached to. And I thought, how horrific for him to just get rid of everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
He just wiped it clean. His values, the father in the book, his values are money and
Mm.
things and status. You know, he wants to be he wants to be admired by people, and she can always hear him. She says she can hear him cajoling and flattering and trying to be the good guy and trying to be somebody of status. There's a wedding and he gets himself very involved in the wedding, you know,
Yeah.
she's like, oh God, he's up there helping people pin money onto the bride and groom, and and he makes her go and pin money on, but she pins she puts the pin in the bride's dress and tucks the fiver down her bra. And she goes,
That was great too. But it does seem to be a disease even more of the diaspora, that they
Mm,
feel like they have something to prove because they are really not part of this culture that they've moved into. So they've always got
mm.
something to prove. And
Yeah,
it's one more burden on the children of the diaspora
I
that,
think it is. It is,
yeah.
even it's all of those cultural things and it's all the extraneous things as well. You know, what people wear, the way they have their hair done, is all the food. All
Mhm.
of these things I think make the children feel like they're really separated from
Mhm.
the larger community that they live in. And that can cause that. I mean, that can cause tensions on quite a big global level or a community level. But in terms of a human being, you're pushed and pulled. You know, you
Yeah.
really are, because of course the thing that you're rebelling against is also the thing that you intrinsically are.
Yeah.
It's hard. You're kind of hating half of yourself in a way.
Truly. That's absolutely true because I recall at that same age you were talking about 11, 12 years old. That's when I became mortified. When I was younger, it was like kind of like, well, this is what it is. And sometimes I'm embarrassed. But by the time I hit pre-adolescence, it was like, oh my God, can you please stop? Can you speak
Yeah.
English? My mother didn't speak. My mother was actually born here, so she didn't speak a lot of Greek to us because she was trying so hard to be American. So everything
Yeah.
I picked up was from the aunts who didn't speak any English.
Right.
So it was sort of her half self-hatred of being
Right.
the daughter of immigrants who wanted to be American,
Yeah.
and then being the child of that, she already half hated herself. But then if I said to her, if we
Mm.
visited the other side of the family, and I said to her, you know what? I'm half white and I really don't get those people. And she said, half white means not at all. I
Oh.
was like, okay, a
Okay, hush
little
my
more,
mouth then. Yeah.
a little more insight in the problem here. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's funny on so many levels. And like Constance, I had friends who were, we'll call them, I guess, white friends, who
Mm,
didn't who thought some of the stuff was fun and I would tell them stories and they would think it was funny, but there was
mm,
some stuff that never quite made it to the conversations
mm-hmm.
because it was either feeling like you were betraying the community by saying these things
Yeah. Yeah.
or that you were letting them know just how different you were.
Yeah. You were a freak.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. I've
And
used that term freaky greeky. Yeah.
freaky Greek. Yeah. Freak nights. I
Yeah.
mean, I remember as a kid, I loved Greek nights. I
Yeah.
loved Greek nights because I had a couple of really good mates there. I could really just be myself, and the food was always spectacular. And
Yeah.
frankly, anywhere that they put on a good spread, I'm a happy person. So there was always that. But if any of it crept into my real life, which was my school life with my English friends, I lied about it a lot.
Yeah.
I had to be very selective about what I said and where I'd been and who I was with at the weekends, because I didn't like the sound of it. It sounded freaky and creepy,
Yeah.
you
And
know,
weird.
and weird,
But
and it was different to everybody else.
yeah.
And then when you get to the age that we are now, you sort of think, actually, it's part of what made me, and I'm sort of grateful for it, you know. But it
Yeah.
just takes a long time, I think, to come to terms with it. I think if you've been culturally stretched, I
Yeah.
think sometimes it does take time.
It does. I was in my early 30s when I fully re-embraced
Mm.
the Greekness because especially because there were clashes between my mother and I to the extreme that my brother rejected it. My older brother, who's very Greek as a young man,
Mm.
just completely walked away from it.
Did
Um,
he?
yeah, because he
Well,
just
that's
like,
interesting with him being male, because males get preference. So that's interesting. He did that.
yeah, but he was also the one who was sort of in charge of everything. Like,
Okay.
take care of your sisters because I was four
Mm.
years younger, and then we have a younger sister.
Mm.
And this uncle is running around dropping cigarettes everywhere. You follow him around, and but I think it was just also her trying to control so much. And he was a musician. He could pick up any instrument and play it.
Mm.
He was such a
Yeah.
free spirit. And I think it actually more than anything was the constant need to control and guide his life the way she thought it should be.
Mm.
You want to be
Yeah.
a lawyer or a doctor, and
Oh, yeah.
he was like, screw it, I'm hitchhiking out to Colorado and doing my
Yeah.
thing. And
But
it,
there is that pressure as well, isn't there? Because our parents have come from often a quite a poor community. Because my father was Greek Cypriot, not mainland Greece, which was, I think, a little bit more European, whereas
yeah.
Cyprus, certainly back in the 60s and 70s, was almost Middle Eastern. It was very different.
Hmm.
And they were very poor, and what they wanted was for their children to become doctors or lawyers. I mean, and I never did. And I remember my parents got divorced when I was about 18, and I saw my dad about 10 years later because he kind of walked away from us, which was probably the best thing. Um, and I tried to explain to him what I did, and he really, the look of disappointment and dismay on his face, and he said, "So what is it you actually do then?" And then I just rethought, and I said, "I'm a teacher. I'm a teacher." And he was like, "Oh, okay." And that computed. He was like, "Okay, a teacher, that's all right then. Not as
That's
good as a
acceptable.
doctor or a lawyer, but it's acceptable." Yeah, you know.
Mm.
He didn't want a daughter who was traipsing around the world after pop stars interviewing them. He would never have understood that at all. That would have almost been like being a prostitute.
I was going to say trash.
Exactly.
Terrible attitude
Yeah.
toward it. Awful.
Yeah. Yeah, because
Yeah.
I did clash very badly with my dad.
Yeah.
He had this very strict idea of what girls should be like, and I had a very different idea.
Yeah. Good for you.
Mm.
That's a very Greek thing, but I think with the Cypriots too, because there's an extra layer of generational trauma in
Mm.
Cyprus. Um,
Yeah, explain that. That's really interesting to me.
Well, there's the that was still a Turkish Greek
Yeah.
island, whereas
Yeah.
there were the population exchanges and people moved out and everything. And
Mm.
then, of course, in the 70s, the Turks invading after
Mm.
the idiot colonels
Greek.
in Greece said, "Okay, let's make this the Greater Greece." They
Yeah.
started that, and
Yeah, they
then
do.
to be divided and harassed, and people lost
Mm.
their homes, and this is modern times. I mean, this isn't like looking back to your
Yeah.
great grandmother. This
Yeah.
stuff happened to your dad's family.
Yeah.
I'm sure whoever
Yeah.
was left there, that they were driven
Yeah.
out of their homes and harassed and God knows what. And it's still going on, you know.
It's amazing that it is still going on, and I remember being in Cyprus before it was separated, before they
Mhm,
created the UN green line, they call it, don't they? That,
mhm.
that kind of bifurcates the island. And my family had Turkish friends. There wasn't an issue particularly,
They lived together. Yeah.
they lived together, yeah. And then, outside influences started to make them recognize their differences,
Yeah.
you know, and then the real drama began. And it's such a shame, but I do remember going to my dad's village and not being able to visit a certain corner of it because it was now Turkish, you know,
Mm,
and
yeah.
not be just. I remember going to Nicosia and looking, and there is a little bit of it in the book which I wanted to include. just looking across at just these oil drums and some sacks of sand. And, that was separating Nicosia, which is the capital of Cyprus, Greeks from the Turks. You could have climbed over them.
Mm.
Obviously there were gunmen either side, so you wouldn't have climbed over them, but it was just how people could so easily be separated, so
Yeah.
easily be torn apart, kept apart by something that you could stand on your tiptoes and look over and wave to the person on the other side. It felt particularly heartbreaking to me. It really did.
And I think it's still very raw in people who came from Cyprus and their children who would be our age, I guess,
Yeah,
and maybe a little younger, and their grandchildren. It's still all
yeah,
fresh in their minds because it was where people were just living next to each other, which
yeah,
is kind of what happened in the whole thing with Anatolia when the Turks pushed all the Greeks out and the Greek genocide and the Armenian
yeah,
genocide. The people were all living there for many, many, many years together
yeah,
without a big deal,
yeah,
and all of a
yeah,
sudden
right.
enemies. So
Yeah,
still trying to,
yeah.
and whatever stress there is between Turkey and Greece, Cyprus is always somehow in the middle of
It
all of
always
that.
is. Yeah. And I think Constance would like to have blamed her father for everything happening.
Yeah,
Everything
let's blame him.
that somehow, yeah, she should be thinking, somehow this is his fault. And eventually I'll decline it and I'll get right down to it being, I will do a root cause analysis and I will find out that he's to blame.
Man, the damn fat murderer. What else can we blame him for? He's
Exactly.
responsible for everything. And I did want to mention she does go to Cyprus, but that would be a real spoiler, the
Mm,
whole outside situation. But I thought that was really cool because you could tell she had the connection always
yeah,
inside of her, even as she was pushing it away, that the
yeah.
connection was there. And for her to go and be able to see Cyprus and to experience it on that gut level.
Yeah, and I really wanted her. I wanted her to be because she is not always right. Constance.
Hmm.
Um, I think her feelings and her emotions are pretty well centered, but the way she deals with them and some of the opinions she has are the opinions of an ill-informed teenager.
Hmm.
And I wanted her to go to Cyprus because I wanted her to learn that it wasn't the whole Greek-Cypriot landscape that she disliked. It was
Hmm.
just a couple of people who had blotted that landscape for her, you know. Um,
Hmm.
and that's really why I don't think this is a spoiler, but when she goes to Cyprus, she meets these three elderly men
I
that she
love
calls
that.
Greek philosophers.
I
And
love that.
she realizes, she learns a lot from them. She doesn't think she's learning from them at all, but she is. They're constantly drip feeding her with local knowledge, with history, with Greek philosophy. And she comes to love them. They're male and they're Greek, and she doesn't hate them, you
Yeah.
know. And I really wanted her to have that experience so that she did come to love the Greek in herself. And one of the philosophers says to her, you think you're weak, but you're not. You're not half and half. You're two lots of something. I can't remember. It
Mhm.
was more eloquent in the book. I can't remember it now. But he said basically, you're not just half Greek and half English. You're totally Greek and you're totally English. You're two things. You can
Mm.
be strong. And that I think stays with her.
And to be able to start to feel the pride in who she
Yeah.
is instead of just shame.
Yeah. Because in the end, even though you and I and lots of people of our generation, above and beyond our generation, have experienced that um, the dichotomy of being part of that, the diaspora, there is something very beautiful and warm and community minded and loving. And sometimes it might be claustrophobic and misguided and overbearing, but there is something about being Greek that
Mm.
somehow you're a part of something. And if you needed to find it, you would find it. And I find
Yeah,
that very comforting.
I do too. And I love the way when my son and I went to visit Greece a couple of years ago, that I would walk in and they would start speaking Greek to me. And everybody always said to me, you don't look Greek. You don't
Right.
look
Yeah.
Greek. You're
Yeah,
too
I had
white.
that.
You don't look Greek.
Yeah.
And I would say in Greek, my Greek is not very good, but I'm trying. And I heard repeatedly from different areas, welcome
Mm.
home. And that was like, oh, because most people are
So,
so aware of the history of Greece, where everybody either
mm,
had to run for their lives to different countries or
yes.
repeatedly, that this is still us, that we're still holding on to
Yeah.
that. And that made me feel, because the other side of the family, I was close to my grandmother, but the rest of them were like really couldn't care less. They were like,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
But but the
Yeah.
Greeks were all like, yes, you're Greek.
Yeah, yeah, I have sisters and they are they're not really connected to their Greekness at all. You know, I think they said by reading the book they said, "Oh God, that's so familiar. We remember that," you know. But
Mm,
I don't think they feel as connected as I do. But you know, even if I don't go to Cyprus, when I go to a Greek island, I feel like I've finally, having been, you know, a square peg in a round hole, I'm in a square hole. I'm fitting and I'm there, you know. And I do
yeah.
try to speak the language, and I think it's terrible. My Greek is pretty terrible, even though I'm on Duolingo night and day, and I've still
Mm.
learned nothing from the language app whatsoever. But I do try with the language, and I do love it. I like speaking it when I can. But
Me too. Yeah.
you know, most of the Greek that I learned was a very it's a real local village Greek, you know. So
Mhm.
it's when I do go to the Greek mainland or some of the other Greek islands and I start to speak Greek, they go, "Oh, are you Cypriot?" So they know me. They go, "Yeah, yeah, I am. I don't know how to speak proper Greek, you know."
Yeah.
But they get it. They know, you know, Portocal is an orange and Milo is an
Yeah.
apple. So, you know, eventually they get it. Yeah.
Yeah. You probably learned the accent, the regional accent as you were
Definitely.
learning. So there is a guy that I'm starting to follow because I'm also ashamed of myself for the level of my Greek.
Mm.
Uh Greek School, Skool. It's like a free, and I liked him. I mean, I was doing
Mm.
it for a while and then I sort of walked away
Yeah.
from it, but I found it very helpful. I'm going to go back to it. So it's
Okay. Oh,
sort of,
that's a good recommendation.
yeah, I'll
Yeah.
find the link and I'll send
Thank
it to you.
you. For you.
Um,
Brilliant.
yeah, that I found him much more helpful because I'm not a person that can sit there and like, here's the word, here's the word, here's the, with him, it's more interactive and it's more like, here's something you can say if you want to like insult somebody. Here's something you can say if you want to
That's
welcome
good.
somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like relating it to actually speaking. I learned most of the Greek when I was around people who didn't speak English and I had to speak it. And that
Yes.
was the best way
Yes.
to learn.
Yeah, me too. I learned when I went to Cyprus. I had a 9 week summer in Cyprus. I think when I was about
Wow.
12.
That must
Yeah.
have been great.
Oh, it was fabulous. I loved it.
Mm,
And I stayed with my aunt and uncle and I loved them and it was
mm.
just brilliant. And there was a boy I fancied as well in the village. So, you know, I mean,
It
it
was
was
all
all made
good.
up. Yeah. And when you fancy a boy and you want to talk to him, you learn that language pretty quick. You know, I was
What
motivated.
incentive.
I was definitely motivated. So I
Yeah.
learned most of my Greek then, and I always think I've forgotten it. But when I go back to a Greek speaking community, a lot of it does come back to me. But I think I sort of speak like a bit of a pigeon Greek, really. You know.
I'll be happy to correct you. That's what's
Yeah.
so funny.
Yeah. There's lovely person who acted the audio book of my novel, a woman called Harayana. And she's such a lovely lady. And she rang me up during her reading of the book when they were recording her reading. And she said to me, so there's a couple of Greek bits. I said, yeah. She was so diplomatic. She said, would you like me to say them how you've written them, or would you like me to say them in the correct way? I was like, oh, just do them how you think you should do them. But I had no idea I'd done it incorrectly at all. But, you know, but it doesn't matter. But I've also had the Mark Bolan fan club contact me and say, there's a few things that there's one thing I said that a certain track was on a certain album, and they rang me and said it wasn't on that album until it was re-released as a CD. But you're talking about the vinyl, and it wasn't on the original vinyl.
Oh
So
dear.
I know. So I said to them, look, before it goes to paperback, tell me all the things I've done wrong so that I can get them, so I can correct them. So they've been very sweet about it, actually.
That's so funny. That is so funny. But as far as the Greek, I picked up on some of that too, but I was thinking it's so difficult to transliterate Greek to English because
Mm,
English does not make those sounds. So there are times when, like with the P sound, it sounds more
mm,
like a B sound.
yeah,
Um, that is because we're not saying P the way people would say it in English. The
yes,
put is
yeah,
more of a B. So
that's right. And like a T is somewhere between a T and a D, isn't it? It's
yeah,
and a D is more of a TH. So it is very difficult to, yeah, as you
you
say, to
can't,
transliterate. Very difficult.
yeah, they can't make those sounds. My father tried at times. You can't make those
No,
sounds.
and also the ha as
Yeah,
well, because it's not the same as a sort of an Israeli really,
yeah,
I have an Israeli friend that says hummus, and I'm like,
yeah.
God, it's spitting it at me. But the Greeks go hummus. So it's light, but it's not native, is it, to the English tongue or the American tongue. So it's difficult
No,
to pronounce them. Yeah.
no, it's not. But so the way that you were writing it, I didn't have a problem with it
Oh, good.
because to me, it sounds somewhere between those two letters.
I
Um,
I think I got a gender wrong, and I think I got maybe a plural wrong or something like that.
oh, my
Um,
grammar sucks. So
barely do English grammar, let alone Greek.
I know. Plus, you're doing a British teenager who is of Greek parentage living in England, and she's gonna get those things wrong. She's
Yes, well, I'd like to blame it on the character and not on the writer. I think
it's her. That's what
that's
it is.
perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. I had so many things that I was interested in talking about. The food. I mean, I think everybody loves reading about food,
Yeah.
and there are some specifically Cypriot dishes that I've had because like our church is, I think, like 30% Cypriot. So I've certainly had that. And but so it was kind of fun for her. This is her home cooking. Why do most Greek foods, why are they shaped like penises? I almost
Because
dropped my
Greek
book.
men like to eat.
Oh God. I nearly dropped my book. I was just, and of course I thought of five people from my church reading that line. And I was like, ah.
Sorry, church people. But a lot of Greek food,
It is when you think I didn't think about that, but yeah, true.
if you think about it, you've got the dolmas, you've got the coupes, everything's quite cylindrical, shall we say?
Even the meatballs, the keftedes are
Even the
often shaped
meatballs.
that way. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, yeah, they are. But they're also very tasty as well. I mean, I love the Greek. I when we had my book launch, I decided to splash out and get a Greek caterer.
Oh, wow.
And the food was delicious, and I was desperate to try the gubes, which used to always be my favorite. If anybody non-Greek is listening, it's like a sort of bulgur wheat torpedo stuffed with herbs and mincemeat and fried. It's
Mm.
delicious. Um, and I had my hands on one, and then a friend of mine said, "No, you need to come over and speak to these people." And she took it out of my hand, and I went off and did, book stuff, and then at the end of the evening, I thought I'm going to get the rest of that Greek food, put it in a tub, and take it home, and there wasn't a scrap left. So I never got a goupes, and oh God, I was devastated, and I
I
keep thinking about
imagine.
them now. It was nearly 2 months ago, and I'm still resentful.
She'd been a real friend, she would have put it aside for you.
Thank you, thank you.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Yeah, and she was handing them out, actually. She was taking the trays round and handing them out to people. And I remember thinking, No, stop giving it to people.
Put it down.
Exactly. Put them back in the corner where I hid them.
Oh
Yeah.
my God,
But
that's
the
so
Greek
funny.
food was, and I loved the descriptions of the Greek food. I liked the description. I loved doing the description of the food at the wedding and how all the drinks and, because Greek weddings are a traditional Greek wedding is not a delicate affair. You
No.
know, they go on forever. The food and the drink is all shoved into the middle of the table, and you're eating a bit of cake, followed by a bit of bread, followed by a bit of tzatziki, followed by something else. And it's a sort of free for all, isn't it, really?
Mm.
And I just remember as a child being in those Greek weddings, there was always one kid that went around draining the alcohol from all the glasses and
My cousin.
always ended up
Yes.
in some kind of coma. And you think, here it is, the coma kid again,
Oh my
drunk
God.
all the booze. But Greeks are not careful about where they leave their booze either. It really is a free for all, and the kids are awake until 2 in the morning. They don't get put to
Yeah.
bed, and it's such a different culture. It is, but I wanted to show how warm and how effusive it is and how generous it all is, but also how chaotic and ultimately quite hilarious as well.
Yeah, those are my favorite parts because it is, and that's what's so embarrassing and endearing at the
Yeah,
same time. This is all
exactly.
that rowdiness.
Yeah, yeah,
And the ants were the sort of the center of that love. And there was something that you said that got me. Subservient female men to obey and marry control. Men doing the man stuff, women doing the women stuff. And Greek Cypriot women's intuition evolved from a lifetime of affecting acquiescence to the patriarchy. Those hit
yeah,
those. I mean, I'm not Cypriot Greek, I'm Greek Greek, but
yeah,
but that, yeah, that
yeah.
there was the man's place and the woman's place.
That's right. And the
And
women were allowed to pretend they were in charge to a certain extent. And, they catered to their men, they made their men happy. But the men, a lot of the men, certainly in the community that we were involved in, were quite aggressive to their wives. Not saying they were all wife beaters because they weren't, but they were, they admonished their wives quite a bit in a way that I think now would be quite unacceptable.
mm, I saw a little bit less of that because, again, like I said, I think in Cyprus, there's like an extra level of
Yeah,
generational trauma,
it is.
which I
Yeah.
think naturally creates more
Mm.
aggression. I did see some of that from a couple of the uncles, but at the same time, it was like, sweet Theothanasi, who was like just such a little teddy bear. If
Mm.
he, very nicely went like this, Athia Pepika was running off to the refrigerator, grab his
Right.
bira.
Yeah.
It was just that's what you do. And they were very sweet and very loving, but he points, she runs for it. And I was like, whoa.
Absolutely. I saw that quite a bit, and I remember my dad used to sort of sit in front of the TV and shout for things that he wanted us to bring him, you know. And it wouldn't be, please bring me a glass of water, it would be fetto nero, and all right then, and it got to a point where I thought, no, you can fetto your own bloody nero, I'm not doing it anymore. you know, and that's, of course, again, part of the push and pull of being stuck between those two communities. You start to think, well, my friends' dads don't shout out and say, bring me water,
Yeah,
so I'm not going to do that anymore. And it's little things like that, small though they are, that grow big in your head when you're young, you know.
they do. They
Yeah,
do. And further separate you from where your parents are. Even
yeah,
if there's a part of you that still loves a bit of that, you still have to, because I'm living in this world. I want to live in this world because you raised me in this world. This is
yes,
where I
that's
am
right.
right now.
Yeah. I was very lucky because I had an English mum, and she was, I mean, she was obviously, in lots of ways, she was sort of acquiescent to my dad, but she always had her own job. She had a corporate job, and so she was always at work, and she had a certain amount of money and independence, therefore. And I
Oh,
think that
wow.
definitely softened the Greek blow for us as children, for sure.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I think, it slightly stole his patriotic power away from him as well, which was, a good thing. It was a leveler. It was something that balanced our household, really, But my dad came from a very aggressive household, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and a very patriarchal household, and his mum was a tiny, by the time I met her, she was a tiny little yaya, you know, who was, sweeping their dusty floors and doing everything that her husband wanted her to do, you know. So yeah, it's part of that culture, and you either find it acceptable or you don't. But I wonder if it's changed now. I don't know. I should imagine it has a bit. Do you think?
I think so. I think it
Yeah,
must have. I mean,
yeah.
certainly I see it in the kids here whose parents came from Cyprus and from
Mm,
Greece. I see that they're more encouraged to go their own way. And of course, more than half of us are marrying non-Greeks,
yeah.
which when I was a teenager, that was like
Oh yeah,
the world must stop now. And
yeah.
now it's most of us.
Did they try to fix you up with the husband?
Yes, and I was
Did
14 when the aunts tried to set me up with a dentist.
they?
At which point I said, that's called statutory rape because in New Jersey, you're not considered of legal age until you're 17, so
Yeah,
no,
yeah,
you
yeah.
want to be
So I don't
arrested.
think so. Yeah. Funny,
Yeah,
isn't it?
that
Yeah,
is
I think
really
both of my
gross.
sisters were both earmarked
Mm.
for for other men, boys at the time. Never me. I was right. I was insulted. I was like,
Maybe they were
oh, okay.
exhausted by the time they got to you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, my sisters were younger than me, so
Oh,
but
okay.
yeah, so they were. Of course, they didn't do it because one sister ended up being gay and the other sister ended up marrying a Turk. So there
There you go. Oh
you
my
go.
God. I love it. I love it. Maybe you were just more obvious in your I'm going my own path. Don't even try to mess with me.
Maybe, or maybe they just took one look at me and thought, nah, it's too much trouble. It's too much trouble. She'll
Oh,
never, she'll
oh, go
never
on.
play ball. Yeah.
That's it. They didn't want to fight with you. Because I was easygoing, they always assumed that I was very pliable, but I was
Right.
actually the one
Yeah.
who wound up saying, I'm moving out today. And my mother,
Amazing.
yeah,
Amazing.
so
And how long did you plan that for? Did it, did
several
it take you
years. Yeah, I was
really?
actually 24 by the time I was
Mm.
making enough income
Yeah.
to move out. But I was 24 years old, and my mother just never forgave me, ever, never.
Wow. And yet you're quite adult at that point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was like, I'm a totally grown person. It's okay for me, and I'm an American. It's okay for me to move out. That's
Yeah.
actually very, very common. But
Yeah.
still, and even in the Greek families that I knew where the parents were born here, when the kids were trying to move out, the parents were like, why would they do that?
Yeah. It's weird, isn't it? I actually did. My parents divorced when I was about 18, and I carried on living with my mum and my sisters until I was 28. And that was partly because I loved being there so much. I
Yeah.
didn't want to drag myself away. And also waiting until I had the income to be able to afford a mortgage, which I
Mhm.
did eventually. And although I loved moving out, I really missed being with the gang. It was a good gang. But
Yeah.
I'm a late developer. I mean, I've got my first book published at age 63, you know, moved
Yeah.
out of home when I was 28. I've always done everything years after everyone else, really.
But I don't think it's late if everybody's getting along and everything is comfortable. I was at loggerheads constantly with my mother about the work that I was doing. And what do you
Yeah.
mean you're going for your master's degree in English literature? What's that going to get you? You're going to be a teacher? Because she knew I didn't want to be a teacher.
Oh yeah.
So it was just, and then the Greek man, I was dating someone and she took me, oh, let's go visit your uncle in Boston. They had a guy waiting there for me.
Oh
It was constant loggerhead. So I was
yeah.
not comfortable. I was not happy. I needed to get away from that.
Yeah.
So I missed being around the aunts, but I would just go and visit them on my own.
Yeah, I think when my parents got divorced, it was really quite interesting because I think my mum was pretty much disowned by the Greek Cypriot
Maybe they
family.
felt disowned by her when she.
Could be,
Mm,
yeah, could have been a bit of both ways, but I think, it was very much it's not what you do. I remember one of one of the aunties in my community talking to her and saying, "This is a big mistake. Don't do this." And my mum said, "Look, this is why I'm doing it." And she had very good reasons. And, one of those women saying to her, but all of the men are like that. You just work around it. You just work around it. And mum was saying, I don't want to work around it anymore. My girls are growing up. I'm going to be left on my own with this man, you know. So I think I'll be moving on. But it was very, nobody got divorced in that community. If they did, the woman was always, she was the wrongdoer, definitely.
putana. Yeah, there was always
Exactly.
something
Exactly.
very wrong with them. You have to choose sides. That attitude of having to choose sides, which,
Yeah.
yeah, I think when I think back at the few divorces in the family,
Yeah.
yeah, that kind of happened. Although, see, Alexandra kind of got away with it, but she was married to a non-Greek, so they were all just like, "You're correcting the problem." So I
Yeah.
guess they were okay with the divorce because
Mm.
they never truly considered her to be married to him to begin with.
Yeah. I don't want to sound, like a man hater. I'm really not. And oddly, I have two Greek male friends now who I'm so close to. I really
Mm,
am. And they're my age. And I love them. We talk Greek stuff and it's really nice. And I had my godfather was a man called Kyriakos, and he was one of the kindest men
mm,
that I knew. And he was a bit older than my parents. He was probably already, when I was a kid, coming up to his late 50s, early 60s.
mm,
And I adored him. He was a very gentle man. He'd been through a lot. He'd fought in the war, you know,
mm.
and he'd been through a lot. And he was a lovely person. And I learned a lot from him, you know. So I do feel like I'm being a bit harsh and a bit um, untoward by the picture I'm painting, because I have met lots of really lovely Greek people and lots of lovely Greek men as well. You know, but in those days there was definitely a very strict delineation between what women were expected to do and what men were expected to do. Constance Costa was having none of it.
Bravo. But
Yeah,
you also had Vas,
yeah,
who pushed against all of that as well. And then
yeah,
Marios, who winds up surprising her because he's always considered the prince,
yeah.
surprising her at how much he gets that. So you definitely
Mhm.
show, but the older generation, it was almost like they had this expectation that you have to show a united front of this. So it's very
Absolutely.
easy to
Yeah.
paint them in a rough light because we were
So
the ones under the boot.
yes. So Marius was somebody, he was a couple of years older than Constance and the rest of her gang. And he was somebody that everyone admired. And his mum only had one child, and he was born with a hole in his heart. So she was his precious prince. And
Mhm,
the way Constance saw it is he got everything. He got a car the minute he was old enough to drive. He always had the best type of watches. He had the best toys when he was a kid. And she's thinking nothing will ever go wrong with your life. But he
mhm.
gets a girl pregnant, and it's a shotgun wedding. And when she says to her auntie, "But does he have to get married?" And her aunt says, "Yes." And she says, "Why?" And the aunt says, "To hide the shame." You know, and she sees suddenly this boy, Marios, who was forced to have this clandestine relationship, which ended up in an unwanted pregnancy, when actually,
Mhm.
if he and the girl that he really loved, who was also Greek, could have dated openly, perhaps they wouldn't have ended up having to get married, you know.
Yeah,
So I wanted to show it from a male perspective as well, because it wasn't just, a young woman that was grappling with that as well.
that was well done. It made him, you had sympathetic male characters who were Greek at the same time.
Yeah.
So I didn't feel like you were just bashing men. It was more
No.
bashing the system.
Yeah. And bashing the fat murderer, you
Oh,
know.
bash that fat murderer. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. Poor fat murderer.
No, not poor fat
Yeah,
murderer.
no, you're right. Not poor. No, mustn't feel pity.
No, because he
Yeah.
never redeemed himself really in
Well,
any
he
way. We got
didn't.
little glimmers of something, but he didn't have it in
Yeah.
him.
No, and particularly, and again, we have to be careful of spoilers if anybody wants to read it after listening to us chat. But he kind of has an opportunity along the way to redeem himself, but his actions show that everything that Constance does is pretty much vindicated, I
Yeah,
think. Yeah.
yeah, it is. And I think it's worthwhile for people to find out why and how. And it is, the joy is in peeling off the layers and just going in deeper and deeper and seeing that's why she's behaving this way. And that's how this came to be.
Yeah.
So it was sort of a coming of age. At times it was almost like a crime mystery because she was trying to kill him and we were trying to figure out, you know, yes, it was bad. Her family was dead, but there were other things underneath that we're
Yeah,
not
there
going to
were.
go into it. There was much deeper trauma that
Yeah.
she was not facing, that little by little she started to face and started to realize it wasn't her,
Yeah.
that things were done to her, that things happened. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was such a pleasure to read.
I'm so pleased you said it. Thank you. And I'm so honestly just so gratified that you got so much from it because when I wrote it, literally it was the best year of my life. Honestly, I loved every second of it. I laughed, I got sad, I was hopeful for the characters. I got so invested in it and I really wanted it to be layered. I wanted it to be rich with symbolism and I wanted it to make the reader question things and to think about it and be and for them to feel involved. And I really wanted to create a character that would stay with you, and you would hear that voice maybe for a while after you'd read the last page of the book. So the fact that you got so much from it is honestly, just a joy for me. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. And I'll tell you, it was such a satisfying trip to the end. It really was very satisfying. So I really have that. And will you be writing another book?
I am going to write another book. Yes, I am.
Yay.
Um,
Bravo.
it's uh, it's um, it's not got any young people in it, uh, but it has a resurgence of one of the characters in the first book who
Ooh,
becomes a catalyst for the things that happen in the second book. And then I have a third book planned, which I'm really excited about writing, which is far more involved in the bifurcation of Cyprus and the relationship between the Turkish and the Greek Cypriots as well. Um, so not a political book by any stretch. It's still a novel and still have some intrigue, and it will hopefully still be a good laugh. But
yeah.
it'll definitely be full on Greek.
Wow. And that to me is something we don't see enough of is the sort of dramatization
Yeah,
of the things happening there, of what's happening to the people. We hear
yeah,
it in such political terms all the time. Everything is political when you come
yeah.
down to it. But the things that people went through at that time, I've become so fascinated with that in the past year or so.
Me
So,
too.
tell me that you'll have your publicist contact me to discuss that book when
I
it comes
will.
out.
I certainly
Because
will. Thank you, Pamela.
thank you so much, Alex.
Thank
It's been a
you.
joy and Kroniopola and Kalistihi with everything that you do.
Charistopoli. Thank you.
Barakalo.
You take care.
Thank you. You too. A special thanks to Alex Kadis for joining us to talk about her novel. I really enjoyed it. You can visit her Instagram account, alex.caddis, and on Substack at Alex Kadis. Big Nobody is available at major bookstores, Amazon, and at Audible. Thanks for listening. Greek Like Me is a Stealth Greek production. I'm your host, Pamela Diotis Wood. Our producer, photographer, and post-production editor is Douglas John. Visit our website at stealthgreek.com for resources, photos, links, and more. Rate, like, and subscribe to help us keep making content about Greeks and Greek culture. Greek Like Me is still working on getting its act together on YouTube, Facebook, and on Instagram at Greek_like_me. See you next time. Yes.